Have you ever stared at your phone and felt like it was staring back? Not buzzing, no reply, just a silence that echoes louder than any word she could have sent. You begin scrolling through the conversation, trying to decode it. Was it the last message? Did you say too much? Not enough? You replay the call. Her laugh sounded genuine, didn't it? Or was it just polite? And then the silence doesn't just sit there, it spreads. From your phone to your chest. From her absence to your self-doubt. And just like that, you're no longer present in your own life. You're orbiting around someone who stopped answering. But what if I told you that silence is not a punishment? It's a mirror, a sacred pause, a signal, not from her, but from life itself, calling you back to yourself. Because in a world that trains men to chase approval, to prove worth, to seek validation in unread messages, the Stoic path teaches us something radically different. Pull back, not to manipulate, but to return. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." And that's where your true magnetism lies. Not in words you send, but in the silence you own. Not in being everywhere, but in being aligned with something unshakable within. You see, detachment isn't absence. It's presence, reclaimed. It's no longer leaking your energy into places that don't nourish you. It's learning to become so full of purpose, so grounded in your own essence, that you stop trying to be remembered and instead become unforgettable. This video isn't about tactics to win her back or tricks to make her jealous. No, that's surface play. This is for the man who's done with games and ready for power. Quiet power, the kind that lives in restraint, in discipline, in the unspoken edge of a man who doesn't chase because he knows who he is. Today, we're going to walk the path of 5 Stoic practices, tools that don't just change how she sees you, but how you carry yourself in every room, every silence, every moment she's not looking. Because that's when real attraction begins. So take a breath, pull your energy back into yourself, and follow me, not into the noise, but into the stillness, where presence is built and where mystery begins. Are you ready? Let's begin the shift. Number 1. Create emotional absence. It's a paradox most men learn too late. What you give freely is often valued the least. Not because people are cruel, but because the human heart is wired for contrast, for tension, for the mystery that only space can hold. And in no arena is this more true than romance. When you're constantly available, constantly reaching, constantly present, you begin to disappear. She may not say it. She may even enjoy the attention at first. But eventually, your presence becomes like background noise. Always there, never missed. And where there is no absence, there can be no longing. Absence is not a game. It's a gravitational force. It's the sacred tension between your presence and your purpose. It's what gives your words weight, your gestures meaning, and your love value. The Stoics knew this. Epictetus once said, "He who is not master of himself will always be a slave to someone else." That includes your attention, your time, your emotional availability. When you give these things too easily, too soon, too often, you're not being romantic. You're being consumed. So how do you shift the balance? It begins with restraint, not from bitterness, but from clarity. Stop over-explaining. Stop oversharing. Stop showing up before you've been invited. You don't need to announce your silence. You don't need to justify your pause. You simply pull back, not to punish her, but to return to yourself. And here's the secret most won't tell you. The less she hears from you, the louder your absence speaks. Every time she opens her phone and doesn't see your name, she feels it. That space? It becomes a mirror, a question, a presence that lingers, precisely because it's no longer predictable. This isn't about ghosting. It's about glowing in your own orbit again. Because your attention is sacred. Your time is sacred. When you spend it on someone, it should feel like a privilege, not a given. And when you stop flooding her inbox with check-ins, affirmations, or updates, when you stop trying to convince her of your worth through constant connection, she'll start to remember why she was drawn to you in the first place. Because absence isn't emptiness. It's evidence of your strength, your mystery, your magnetism. I once knew a man, let's call him Eli. Quiet, powerful, the kind of presence that didn't need to prove itself. He met a woman, fell hard, and gave all of himself too quickly. Messages morning and night, calls during work, constant reassurance. At first, she adored it. But slowly, her replies grew shorter. Her enthusiasm faded. The very thing he thought would win her made him invisible. When he finally stepped back, not in anger, but in calm alignment with his worth, everything changed. She noticed. She wondered. She reached. But by then, Eli had already found something deeper than her attention. He found himself again. That's the shift. You're not trying to be chased. You're learning to stop chasing. To give your energy, not away, but within. To let your silence not just speak, but lead. So the next time you're tempted to text, to explain, to fill the quiet with words she hasn't earned, pause. And remember, in the language of attraction, mystery speaks louder than effort. And absence is the ink. Number 2, become the man in motion. Stillness can be powerful, but stagnation is deadly. When she pulls away, many men freeze. They wait. They obsess. They scroll back through old messages, rewatch conversations in their mind, and unknowingly slip into emotional paralysis, hoping her next move will bring them relief. But here's a truth you must understand deeply. The man who sits still waiting for her attention becomes forgettable. The man who moves, who rises, who creates, who sharpens, becomes unforgettable. In the Stoic tradition, movement is not frantic. It is not panicked. It is intentional, directed. Virtue in motion. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher emperor, wrote in Meditations, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one." That's the call. When someone distances themselves from your life, don't chase. Don't wait. Don't become still. Move. Not toward them, but toward who you're becoming. Let your silence be filled with effort, with evolution, with the kind of quiet building that turns confusion into curiosity and heartbreak into horsepower. This isn't just about self-improvement, it's about self-return. Because before her, you had a rhythm, a hunger, a dream, and if you didn't, then her absence is your invitation to find one. Go to the gym, not to post it, but to feel your strength return. Dive into your craft, not to be admired, but because creation cleanses. Rebuild your focus, not for revenge, but for remembrance of who you were before you tried to be enough for someone else. Because when a man becomes a force of motion, he enters the rarest kind of attractiveness, momentum. It's magnetic, not because you're showing her something, but because she can feel something shifting, even from afar. She'll feel it when you stop responding within seconds. She'll feel it when your stories shift from vague quotes to real movement. She'll feel it when your attention is no longer a faucet she can turn on with a late-night text, but a fire you now burn for something higher than her validation. And even if she doesn't say it, she'll notice. And you'll stop needing her to. Because the man in motion doesn't chase closure. He creates it. He doesn't wait for permission to rise. He just rises. He doesn't prove his worth. He becomes it. I remember a friend named Adrian. After a breakup, he was wrecked. Not because she left, but because he had lost himself in loving her. So he did something radical. He took his grief to the gym, to books, to silence. And every day, brick by brick, he rebuilt the man he forgot he was. 6 months later, she messaged him. "You feel different." He smiled. Because she was right. He was different. But by then, he didn't need her to see it. And that's the real power. Not in being noticed again, but in becoming so grounded, so disciplined, so fiercely alive, that her noticing becomes irrelevant. Because motion isn't just about progress. It's about power. And when you stop orbiting her and start becoming your own sun, you don't just draw her back. You become the center of your own life again. And that is where your story begins to change. Number 3, speak less, reveal less. Words are cheapened when given too freely. And in the age of oversharing, where every emotion becomes a status update, every thought a caption, there's something profoundly magnetic about the man who chooses restraint. When you speak less, you create space. Space for her mind to fill in the blanks. Space for her to wonder, to imagine, to question. And that's where real attraction breathes, between the notes, not within them. The Stoics revered silence not as emptiness, but as power. Seneca once wrote, "Speech is silver, silence is golden." He wasn't glorifying passivity, he was honoring control. The discipline to speak only what is necessary, to reveal only what strengthens the message, to hold something back, not from fear, but from principle. If she knows everything about you by week 2, what's left for her to discover? Mystery isn't about being fake. It's about being full, so full of depth, of thoughts, of life, that no conversation could capture all of you. And when you stop filling every silence with updates, reactions, or validation-seeking questions, you invite her to lean in. Let her wonder what's on your mind. Let her wonder where you are, what you're doing, why you've grown quiet. And not out of manipulation, but because your words now carry purpose. This shift is not a tactic. It's a transformation from emotionally reactive to emotionally grounded. When she texts, you don't rush to reply. Not because you're playing games, but because you're engaged in something real, something personal, your life. When you're with her, you speak from presence, not performance. You don't need to say, "I miss you" every hour. When the words come, they land like thunder, precisely because they've been earned. Think of your communication like a campfire. A few well-placed logs, spaced with care, allow the fire to breathe and burn strong. But throw too much wood too fast, and you suffocate the flame. Your words should warm, not overwhelm. And most importantly, don't explain your silence. Don't preface your distance. The moment you explain it, you shatter the mystery. She asks, "You've been quiet lately." You smile. Maybe nod. Maybe say, "Just focused." Let her feel the energy behind your quiet, not the need to justify it. And here's where the transformation begins. When she feels the shift in your presence, she starts to mirror it. She texts more thoughtfully. She listens more closely. She begins to question the rhythm she took for granted. Not because you forced her to care, but because your silence reminded her that access to you is no longer guaranteed. And in that space, something ancient reawakens, the chase. But now, it's no longer you chasing her approval. It's her chasing your attention, not because you withheld it as punishment, but because you finally realized its value. So speak less, reveal less, not to control her, but to center yourself, not to create games, but to create gravity. And if you ever doubt the power of your silence, remember this. The man who speaks with restraint commands more than attention. He commands respect. And when your silence becomes a choice, not a reaction, you stop being someone she talks to casually and start becoming someone she thinks about deeply. That is the real voice of a Stoic. Number 4, reclaim your energy from leaking to leading. Every day, you wake up with a limited reservoir of energy, mental, emotional, spiritual. And most men spill it before the sun even rises. Not through effort, but through attention. You give your energy to the thoughts that loop in your mind, to the memories that no longer serve you, to the messages you keep checking, hoping her name appears. You hand your power over to speculation, to fantasy, to fragments of her that exist only in your mind. And then you wonder why you feel empty. But what if energy wasn't meant to be chased, but stewarded? What if your peace depended not on receiving her attention, but on reclaiming your own? The Stoics believed deeply in this. Marcus Aurelius warned, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." When you obsess over someone who isn't choosing you, your soul begins to wear their indifference like a cloak. You stop living for your rhythm and start dancing to a song they're not even playing anymore. Reclaiming your energy begins with radical honesty. Ask yourself, where's my attention going? What am I fueling, growth or fantasy? Your mind is not a playground for someone who stopped showing up. It's a temple, and temples aren't built on hope, they're built on discipline. So return to your rituals. Start small. Wake up early, not to impress, but to align. Breathe deeply, not to calm her absence, but to remind yourself of your presence. Read, not to escape, but to awaken. Write, not to perform, but to clarify. Move your body, not to post progress, but to feel your pulse again. Cold showers, heavy reps, deep silence. These aren't trends, they're reclamations. Every time you lean into discomfort, you tell your nervous system, I am here. I am enough. I no longer beg for peace. I build it. And here's the beautiful shift. When your energy returns to you, so does your power. You begin to walk differently, speak differently, think differently. Not because you're pretending to be healed, but because your healing is no longer waiting for her permission. Energy isn't just about activity, it's about direction. Stop sending texts you don't mean just to feel something. Stop checking her story to see if she's watching yours. Stop letting your emotions get hijacked by someone who's not contributing to your soul. Because every time you reclaim a piece of yourself, you build a fortress around your peace. And in that space, your clarity returns. Your masculinity roots. Your presence deepens. You become less reactive, more selective. Not because you're bitter, but because you've tasted stillness and chaos no longer excites you. I once knew a man named Cade. After a toxic relationship drained him, he didn't retreat. He rebuilt. He signed up for a Muay Thai gym, started meditating every morning at 5 a.m. He read meditations cover to cover. And within weeks, his energy was no longer scattered. It was centered. She noticed. Of course she did. But by then he didn't care. Because he realized the power wasn't in being missed. It was in no longer needing to be. That's the quiet transformation. You stop reaching. You start rising. And in doing so, you teach your body, your mind, your soul, that love was never meant to be an energy leak. It was meant to be an energy exchange. And if the exchange is gone, your energy belongs to you again. So reclaim it. Every breath, every moment, every heartbeat, until your presence feels so rooted, her memory can't shake it. Number 5, align with your core values. There comes a moment in every man's journey where he must ask himself, not, what does she want from me? But what do I expect from myself? It is a sacred turning point, a shift from external obsession to internal alignment, from performing to pleasing to simply being. Because if you spend your life trying to mold yourself into what attracts her, you will constantly shapeshift, chasing the next signal, the next validation, the next smile of approval. And in doing so, you become forgettable, a reflection of her preferences, not a reflection of your principles. But when you begin living from your core, when your values become your compass, you stop chasing love and you start radiating power. The Stoics spoke often of this kind of inner congruence. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily, if it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it. Simple, brutal, liberating. It's not about being good for her. It's about being true to yourself. So ask yourself, what do I stand for when no one's watching? What virtues shape the way I treat others? What boundaries protect my peace? What principles define my masculinity? And here's the paradox. The more aligned you are with your internal code, the less effort it takes to be magnetic. Integrity is rare. In a world flooded with noise, the man who speaks little but lives by a code, he stands out. Because real attraction isn't about charisma, it's about clarity. Clarity that says, I don't chase people. I live by principles. Clarity that says, I'd rather lose someone by being real than keep them by being fake. Clarity that says, I will not beg, bend, or break to be chosen. When you live this way, something changes. You stop asking, will she come back? You start asking, am I proud of how I showed up? That's the only question that matters. Because relationships may begin and end, but your character walks with you every day. And here's what few will admit. Sometimes, she doesn't miss you because she remembers the version of you that forgot who he was. The man who texted too quickly. The man who apologized for having needs. The man who compromised his edge to keep the peace. But when you return to your core, when you speak with clarity, act with courage, hold your frame with grace, then, and only then, can your absence feel holy. Then your silence is not a void, but a reminder of a man worth knowing and worth losing. I knew a man once, Caleb, who stopped apologizing for his standards. He stopped twisting himself to fit the shape of someone's expectations. He showed up honestly, consistently, and quietly. Some left, some stayed, but he no longer bent for either. Because he wasn't living for reaction, he was living in alignment. And you know what happened? People started showing up differently. Not because he demanded it, but because his presence required it. That's what happens when you align with your core. You stop seeking validation in her eyes. You start seeing value in your own. And when you walk this path, not perfectly, but faithfully, you become the kind of man whose presence is felt, even in his silence. Because integrity whispers louder than performance ever could. And in the end, what you stand for will define you far more than who stood beside you. And then, something shifts. She checks your profile more than usual, lingers on your name in group chats, replies with just a little more hesitation, a little more curiosity, a little more wonder. But you're not watching for it anymore. Because your eyes, once fixed on her, now look inward. Your energy, once scattered across hopes and unread messages, has returned home. And you begin to realize her curiosity is not your reward, it's a side effect. A side effect of a man who remembered his worth, who traded reaction for reflection, who walked away, not to be chased, but to be changed. This isn't revenge. This isn't payback. This is peace, the most sacred kind. The kind born not from silence itself, but from a man who knows what his silence means. Because when she starts wondering where you went, you'll already be miles ahead. Not running, not hiding, but evolving, steadily, calmly, profoundly. She will think of you, not as the man who begged for her time, but the man who reclaimed his own. She will notice the gap you once filled, not because you made noise, but because you now move like someone who doesn't need to be noticed to feel whole. And in that noticing, she'll begin to feel what you once felt. Longing, uncertainty, desire without direction. But you'll meet those feelings with grace. You won't need her attention to validate your presence. You won't need closure to feel complete, because you've aligned with something greater, your code, your values, your quiet fire. Epictetus said, "Don't explain your philosophy. Embody it." You don't need to tell her you've changed. You don't need to post it, text it, or prove it. She'll feel it. In the silence. In the shift. In the absence that now holds more gravity than all the words you once tried to use to keep her close. And maybe she comes back. Maybe she doesn't. But by then, the outcome won't matter. Because the man you've become no longer revolves around anyone but his own highest self. That is the art of detachment. That is the Stoic path. Not cold, but clear. Not distant, but disciplined. Not indifferent, but deeply rooted in what truly matters. So if this video stirred something in you, some quiet knowing, some reminder of the man you are when no one's looking, honor that. Carry it. Live it. And if you found strength here, real, grounding, soul-deep strength, I invite you to subscribe to this channel, Stoic Now, not as a follower, but as a fellow traveler, a man committed to living from within, no longer moved by the winds of someone else's attention. Share your reflections in the comments. Or don't. You don't owe performance to anyone here, just presence. And if you choose to speak, speak from the silence you've now made sacred. Thank you for being here. Now go, not to be remembered,